Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight as we get to relive an amazing memory from last year that has left such a lasting impact on all of us.
Thank you, Amber, and welcome everyone tonight. I'd like to get us started in a good way with a land acknowledgement. I personally live and work on unceded Indigenous land, traditionally known as Takaranto, covered by Treaty 13 territory. This land is home to many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, including Inuit and Métis. I gratefully acknowledge these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land from the beginning to present day, and I'm conscious that everything we've ever needed has been provided to us by the land, and it is my responsibility to care for that reciprocal relationship. Today, we are gathered in a circle of storytelling, which is incredibly important in Indigenous culture and is a legacy of their culture. And while this is a panel, and we say the word panel as discussion panel, those are colonialist terms that are that don't actually capture the spirit of what we're doing today. What we're doing is having first-hand accounts of the transformation that an experience like a conference meant for ECEs and childcare workers, created by ECEs and childcare workers, can have on a person. And that is in itself the gift that we're giving today, as well as a really important part of our process, that we make time to remind ourselves of what we've done, as well as pass that along to other folks. So as we begin this discussion, I want to invite you to soak in the radical nature of our care for children everywhere, as well as imagine what our leadership could achieve when ECEs are put into those positions. So without further ado, I'm going to start to introduce our panel for tonight. The first person we're going to add to the screen is Safra Najeemudeen. Their pronouns are she, her, and they are professional learning specialists. We are also joined by Claudia Gracias. Her pronouns are she and her, and they are an RACE and professional learning facilitator. Meike vanGerwen, pronouns she, her, is an information and communications officer at the Family Care Office at University of Toronto. Danielle Wittick, her pronouns are she and her, is the director of program development and a pedagogist. Tracy Rees, pronouns she and her, is the executive director of Tender Loving Daycare in Cambridge. And finally, my name is Jess Tomas, and I am a community organizer at the AECEO, and my pronouns are they and them, and I will be facilitating the conversation tonight. I wanted to first begin with a huge sense, I want to give you a sense of appreciation for what the AECEO, from the AECEO, sorry, to you folks on the screen right now. There is no way we could have done what was in our brains as just an idea, as this crazy idea that no one had ever done before, where ECEs and childcare workers from top to bottom were going to curate a provincial conference. And there's no way that would have been possible if you folks hadn't been brave enough to say yes to our call. And there's no words for how long the legacy of your actions will be felt by our sector, but I can tell you at the AECEO, we think about what you folks did on a very regular basis. It's a touchstone for us to refer back to for our work, as well as a grounding point for what is possible for us. So if folks don't know about the AECEO Provincial Conference, it was last year, And like I said, incredibly unique in its formation and the way in which it was meant to be received by our sector. It was an incredibly difficult, I don't want to sugarcoat, it's difficult, it was tiring, it was, had moments of doubt, but in the end, folks on the screen persevered and provided the sector with something that they didn't even know they needed. So I'm going to start with Danielle. I'd love to ask you a question. Acknowledging the unique approach to curating the 2023 AECEO conference, were there any hesitations to lead with ECEs first?
There was, Jess, and that's a great question. Our circle of presenters were 2 directors, 2 supervisors, and 2 educators that came together prior to the conference to present for our organization, A Night on the 5 Senses. And when I came to the group with the idea of presenting at the AECEO conference, unfortunately, one educator felt that she was being taken away from her classroom and she couldn't do both. So she declared that she was going back to the classroom, but her room partner said, "Can I do this without her?" And we came together and we circled around her and we were like, "You can do this. We're going to support you through this." And then when we presented to the AECEO, they actually came back to us and said, "We want you to talk more on something you're not putting your finger on." And we were like, "Oh, what is that?" And it was Safra and Amber and the committee conference team that said, "You know, we're doing something different. We want to raise each other up. We want to put the ECEs first. We don't want to have a skill building, but we want to show the importance and the voices that ECEs have in this sector for each other." So they came back to us with the questions that are the foundation and the heart to the conference. And that was, how are we going to learn from each other? And how do we center the voices of educators? And that it starts with the educator and ends with the educators. And how do we raise each other up? And it was those words that we sat back and we're like, yeah, we didn't just do a presentation to our organization. We gave each other voices and we stood on each other's shoulders. And it was the AECEO that sort of presented that to us.
Thank you, Danielle. And I think that says a lot to the capacity for early childhood educators to come into these spaces with a pedagogical mindset, with a philosophical mindset, an ideological mindset that isn't always supported or even recognized by the general public. And that is such a great example of the potential for ECEs when we give them space to dream like that. In addition to that strong philosophical approach to building this conference on values and principles of joy, curiosity, and hope, raising each other up, what are some of the ways that this conference, and I'm going to extend this to Meike, what are some of the ways that this conference put those ideas into practice?
I think Danielle sort of touched on it when she said one of the educators excused themselves from the presentation because of their dedication to the classroom. And that, going back to your first question, that was one of my initial hesitations. Was I only recently left the sector a year ago, and so up until then had been in the sector for 13 years. So I was quite familiar with the barriers that educators on the floor experience, and we don't have time to do our own professional learning. Any programming time that educators have is specifically to the classroom programming for the children, and asking educators to work outside the classroom to prepare presentations was asking them to go above and beyond. So we intentionally sort of took that into creation, and kept it in mind, and created a survey and put it out through the AECEO's listserv to ask educators what their barriers were to presenting at a conference. And it was quite fascinating. It confirmed any of my own hesitations of what I expected the barriers to be. And if you don't mind, I'll throw some numbers at you. Basically, 26% of respondents said, heck yes, I would submit a proposal and know exactly what to do. Like, and that's not a lot. And then the other half of it was that the 74% of respondents said that yes, anything from yes, but I don't know what topic to present, to no, I don't see myself as an expert. And so I think that was just a reflection of what sort of a reflection of the field and seeing themselves as experts to share knowledge, like they might see themselves as experts within the classroom. And then the other part of it was that 80% of respondents simply didn't know or had never completed a call for proposals. So that we took that information and used it as motivation to create a more accessible process and breaking down the barriers to help educators see themselves that this was exactly the place for them, regardless of what their perceptions of what a conference might be. And one of the very specific ways was that we created a couple of information sessions. So anybody who even had like an inkling, even had a spark of joy, a spark of an idea that, hey, like maybe they were invited to come to information sessions to then we answered any questions they might have, went through the call for proposals to sort of break it down and help them realize that this was exactly the place for them, regardless of what they might see as barriers.
Meike, can I ask you a follow-up of that? Do you have any examples of someone who was a little hesitant and then ended up going to the info session?
I think we answered, we did, I won't say their names specifically, but we did have quite a few people who sort of came and said, well, like, what about this idea? And we're like, of course, like, you know, this is where you would, we sort of went through the application process and said, in this specific spot is where you would put that information. And then even we worked with one group who, even when they did put in their information and submitted it, they still got feedback from the conference committee about their proposal to then be like, yes, you're on the right track, but do it this way a little bit more, you know, like everybody wasn't sort of rejected right away if they were headed in the right direction. And the other thing that surprised me was the number of proposals that we did see where the focus was the children. And so those ones we did reject, but only because that wasn't the purpose of this particular conference. And the idea was to center the learning and the experience of the educators and improving their own skills and capabilities.
So I'm going to just call attention to that particular action of acknowledging and knowing our sector so well that you knew that there was going to be some hesitation in one way or another, and having a method to not just address that hesitation, but to bring people forward and scaffold them into a position. And I saw, Danielle, you had your hand up. I think you were one of those people that were scaffolded to participation.
Yeah, we, through this entire process, when we first put in our papers to try and present, we were like, well, and then when we got the letter back saying, well, did you think of this? We're like, oh, did we get rejected? And I'm like, well, let's go to info night. Let's find out. Let's see what it's all about. And through the entire process, we were like, I don't know, do we have this? And then we would get an email, you have this, keep going, or get another push, or we would do another info. So even through the entire process, right up until that Saturday morning, we were still like, can we do this? And then the lights came on and we're like, yeah, I think we can. They told us we could. So yeah, we can.
That's amazing, Danielle. So we've talked a bit about some of the ways in which folks were invited into this process. And none of this would have happened without a really progressive conference curator, a conference designer. And Safra Najeemudeen was the professional learning coordinator at the time where we created this conference. I want to ask you, as the conference designer, what are some of the ways that this conference was intentionally and uniquely curated to support that transformative learning? And you know, I'm going to talk a bit, I use that term transformative learning where I'm referring to someone like Danielle, who is different now that they were able to do that presentation. So if you could also describe to us what transformative learning is as well.
Yeah, sure. Conference designer sounds very fancy, but yeah, thank you. I'll take that. So when I look at professional learning, just from my background experience, working with post-secondary students and now in-service and pre-service students, I always look at learning not to kind of exist in isolation, but it should actually be learning where you get knowledge that can be changed into action. And that's why I'm kind of very hooked on to transformative learning theory, which looks at creating opportunities for individuals to critically reflect and possibly evaluate their existing knowledge to shift their existing understandings and perspectives. So what that kind of would look like with, for example, if I use Danielle's team and their presentation. So their focus was they saw themselves almost as experts, I would say, in working with children. That's it. And they were very confident to come and talk about how their sensory night impacted children. And so this is where transformative learning comes. So with the conversation and feedback process that we had with all presenters, including Danielle's team, it was about how you ask critical questions for them to shift their thinking into being experts to creating professional learning for ECEs or for the NIAD team, for Danielle's team. Thinking about, so we asked them prompt questions saying, how did you support each other through this process? What inspired you to do this? So we're really digging deep into how they were there for each other as a team, more so than the actual impact of creating the sensory night for our children. And that's what we did with actually most of the presenters. As Meike said, the bulk of our presentation, so we got over 100 proposals, and all of them, the majority of them, I can't say all, the majority of them did focus on practice. And so as the conference committee, we sat with those proposals and we did reject some where if the person's focus, research focus was specifically on a specific play-based or loose parts research, then we couldn't move it around. But if it was a presentation based on an experience similar to Tracy's team or Danielle's team, what we did was creating those critical questions. We kind of push their thinking to a different way and encourage them, if they were willing to go and have those conversations, either they're critically reflecting with themselves, thinking about how creating this specific experience impacted them, or they're working with their colleagues and thinking about how it critically impacted each other and their community. So that's kind of how transformative learning, and I guess this was kind of the hidden agenda within our conference, was to show ECEs that you could do this. And our work does not just impact children and families, but it impacts our community significantly. And I think it's these impacts and outcomes that often get hidden or overlook, the fact that we are strong and we do raise each other up, but it's just governments don't see that, right? All they see is that the outcomes that we have on children and families. So yeah, so it was kind of a sneaky way, but also it ended up with huge impacts that we continue to see today, where individuals are because of this conference, we came together to have a conversation. And 1 year later, they're still having those conversations and thinking about new ways to support their communities, specifically that isn't necessarily connected to children and families, but raising each other up and supporting the ECE's curiosities and their interests and their needs. So, yeah.
Safra, so before I let you go and move on to the next question, I just wanted to ask you a follow-up about you were very disciplined in making sure this was going to be focused on the ECEs. There was even a sentiment, it's very easy for organizations to tap onto the most recognizable name or the most popular speaker to come to the conference.
Mm-hmm.
What made you so sure that wasn't the way for this to work?
Having worked at the association and doing professional learning for over a year for the AECEO community, I got the opportunity just to actually see the impact of focusing on ECEs rather than practice. So this is what we did within the professional learning at the association. We would create spaces for ECEs to have those critical dialogues, conversations that push their thinking. And I saw that impact. And then I would go into spaces where, for example, it would be a conference that talks about celebrating ECEs. And then I would go in there and it's all about practice. So I'm like, where is the celebration of the ECE if it just comes down to practice and how our practice impacts children and family? Yes, we know whatever the growth is on the ECE impacts children and families, but what about the ECE themselves? We are more than our practice, right? As we can see within this conference, like all those presenters, all those participants, I'm sure Amber will be able to pull up the numbers on how many individuals we had participate at the conference. To have that impact and to talk about, for us to be raising each other up and to highlight that, the fact that we do this work was really important. Yes, it did include a lot of discipline, a lot of sweating, and it was a lot of work too, definitely, because transformative learning it's not easy, because when we sit with a proposal and we're like looking at it, we have to critically think about what do we want to pull from this proposal, staying true to the initial presenter's ideas, because I don't want to just like randomly shift their thinking and they're talking about this and talk about something completely different. I want them to build on what they know, but I want to push their thinking to think about a part of their experience that they wouldn't have necessarily thought about. That's what it was, the whole conference was at. And we played with language discourse too, to kind of cause some kind of resistance. And I pulled this first sentence from the call for proposals. And what we wrote in the first paragraph of the call for proposals was, in an attempt to step away from a traditional academic gathering, we especially welcome and encourage submissions from early years professionals who haven't traditionally seen themselves as conference presenters. So this in itself is like the conference committee. We sat together. It took a while to put this call for proposal because we wanted to really play with language so that just within this first paragraph, we're encouraging ECs to pause, right? There is a pause there because ECEs immediately when they read this, it forces them to pause and reflect and ask, do I see myself as a conference presenter? What does it mean? What does a non-traditional academic gathering look like? Like who is going to be in this space? Who are the presenters? Am I one of them? So it just like encourages individuals in that way. And that's just like one example of it.
Thank you, Safra. And
Jess, I'm just going to add something.
yeah, of course.
The other thing that Safra intentionally did was you didn't only have to create a presentation, right? It didn't only have to be a panel, but she had a multiple of ways that invited people to share their knowledge, such as workshops, artistic performances, panel discussions, or contribute to a salon or gallery. So people didn't have to, I think when I think of like a conference, I think of one person standing at the front of a room. And so if that's not how you see yourself, then there was also the open invitation for people to express their learning in a multiple of ways.
Yeah, and that is an incredible segue to my next question, because I want to talk to Tracy specifically, thinking about all of these ways in which the conference committee made an intentional call out to ECEs. What made you know, and what moment was it that you knew this was for you?
So honestly, when the flyer came into my email, the title was the first thing that caught me. We raise each other up. And then I read a little further, and there was like sharing and learning from each other, and ECE's building leadership and learning skills. And I just was like, this is our daycare. This is our community. These are some of our core values. This is a perfect fit for us. And so I immediately kind of printed off the flyer and went walking around the daycare going like, who'd like to do this with me? Like, who thinks they can? And they were like, oh, no, it's not for us. And I had just finished a master's. And so they knew I had kind of presented for that. And they were like, oh, you can do it. And I'm like, no, it's not just for me. Like, this is our story. Like, they want to hear our stories. And then I went back to Safra, that thing that said, you know, it's the ECEs on the front line. Like, it's not just presenters that are supposed to do this. And we are a close-knit community. And they knew that this was kind of a dream of mine to speak at a conference someday. And this was the perfect context for it. I was like, but I need your help. Like, I want you to tell your stories with me. And, you know, lovingly, 4 of them stepped up to the plate and said that, okay, like maybe, I don't know, I'll give it a try. And we did. We went to the info sessions and we listened to the feedback, and we would reach out to you and say like, hey, we're thinking this format, what do you think? And it was with all of that support that, you know, along the way, we really thought, yes, this is the place that we can do this. And, you know, as we were doing it, it was really, truly a team building thing for us as well, because we knew we were a close team, and, you know, 4 people decided to speak, but someone else stepped up and said, well, I'll be your tech. I'll come and help you set up in the morning. And we had 2 other staff who came and just kind of rah behind us, behind the scenes, outside the cameras. Like, they were sitting behind people going like, you got this, you can do this, keep talking. And so it was just a lovely, lovely process. And I don't think without the wording, like you said, and without the supports that were being offered, I don't think that we would have been confident enough to even try. And, you know, I truly can't say thank you enough for the opportunity.
Oh, that's amazing, Tracy. And I know Meike also talked about this a little bit before as well, about how it wasn't necessarily just about presenting and being a conference presenter. There were many different ways that folks could be involved. And one of the most surprising and kind of innovative things that we did was that first night with the rooms and the different, I guess, not activities. You know what, Claudia, I'm gonna have you describe it better. If you could describe what your role was on that first night.
Like a lounge, kind of?
Yeah, the lounges.
Yeah. Okay, so several of us sort of came up with different ideas for lounges. Like, one would just kind of be like a kind of coffee shop, like, you know, chat and kind of get to know each other. And I didn't really have an idea. So I was like, okay, I'll just, you know, go with, buddy up with somebody else. And so another conference committee member, Emma, came up with the idea to have like a room, and it was called Raising Each Other Up Through Song. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what this is about, but like, okay, I'll try it. And I didn't realize it was like actual singing. So I feel like, okay, with like public speaking and like presenting, facilitating, all that stuff, but like, I'm not a singer. So I felt like excited and also nervous. And then trying to remember like, okay, music and singing creates like joy, and you know what, just do it, like whatever. Emma was so enthusiastic and supportive. So I was like, okay, we got this. If she believes I can do it, then like, yes. And it was just amazing connecting with the larger community. Like, I expected to feel out of my comfort zone, like a fish out of water, and just really like, I don't know, uncomfortable, kind of being centered. But that sort of started to fall away as the singing and the sharing began. We were like laughing, we were joking around. Other participants were sharing songs that they liked and stories and making connections. And it didn't feel like, you know, I was on a stage talking or singing to people. It really felt like we were in a room together, hanging out, and just like connecting. And I feel like my fears or any of that ambivalence changed more into joy. I felt supported and valued and really like I belonged. Like this was a group of like my people, you know, like people who have the same interests as you or same career, and like you connect on so many levels. And then to also be in that space, and even though it was like a Zoom room, it still felt like we were together. And so the experience really sort of shattered my self-limiting expectations of like what I can't do and like not being a singer, and validated me as a person and really showed me what I'm capable of when you're in community with other people. So I feel like I was able to do it because of the people, the participants who were also into it, believing in you. And that's the beauty of it, right? We're creating this thing together. We're raising each other up, and it spreads. And it was really, really transformative, really great.
Amazing. And it is, again, I've not been to any other conference or heard of any other conference, especially virtual, that had such a focus on that first night being networking, getting to know each other, and really creating community. Meike, I wonder if you could add a little bit more about the intention of the lounges.
So one of the things that
sort of a blessing in disguise. I know everybody focuses on the negative aspects of COVID, but I think for our sector in particular, the moving to the digital format has just done amazing things to connect the ECE community across the province, in particular. And so as we were creating it, we did discuss whether doing it in person or virtual, and we did make the conscious decision to do it virtual. To keep costs down, to make it more accessible to ECEs across Ontario. I believe we also had people from outside of Ontario join as participants. And so, but one of those challenges was that then without meeting in person, it might remove the face-to-face connection and meeting and making friends that happens at conferences. So that was the idea where the lounges came from that Claudia was speaking of, was to create spaces that were less formal, that people could just hop in and out of, based on different themes. And it worked. That was another part of the conference that we were all very hesitant, like, what if nobody shows up? What if Claudia is sitting there in a room by herself? Singing to herself, but it worked, and I think everybody in every room, like, were quite impressed with how whatever the theme was chosen turned out quite well.
It really did. That was one of the most wonderful surprises, I think, that came out of the conference, was the ability to create community on that first night with those lounge and the topics. The topics were incredibly intentional and incredibly well thought through. So again, it's a surprise. It was a surprise. I didn't know how it was going to turn out either. As someone who was mostly here for the tech side, I wasn't really much in for the development side. Tracy, I wonder if you have any of those moments where the result kind of surprised you, or like Claudia validated you.
So I think we had both. So, I mean, I think it was surprising to me how quickly we turned from scared to death to feeling empowered. And so before the cameras went on, we were all nervous and, oh, I wonder how we'll do, and all of these things. And one of our team members actually even had a panic attack just right before the cameras went on, and kind of pulled it back together again. And we went through, but then we started to see the conversations happening in the chat and really seeing that we were making connections. And again, like Claudia, I think that kind of like edged us on, and like, this is really working. Like, people are really enjoying the conversations that we're having. And then we got to the end of it, we turned the cameras off, and we were like cheering and hugging. And it was just so emotional, like the sense of accomplishment that we had from just doing that together as a team. And then we went out for breakfast afterwards, and we were like, did you see that comment about this? And did you see the comment about that? And it was just wonderful, the feeling that we had. And then we also got the chance to reflect again when we were writing our article for the ECE link that Safra asked us to do, and that was lovely. And as we reflected on the whole process again, I put out a little survey to the 4 ladies and said, like, give me all your feedback about this. And one of the team wrote back, I never saw myself as a leader, but I do now. And I was like, how much more validating is that for her as a frontline ECE to be able to have that transformation just by going through this process? Like, it was amazing.
That's beautiful. I wonder, Danielle, do you want to talk a little bit more about the article, about what that was? Because this was after.
It was after the fact. Safra reached out and asked if I wouldn't mind reflecting on the process that we went through to present at the AECEO conference. And I'm like, me? I don't write. I'm an ECE. Anyway, so I took it and I took the challenge, and wow, what another layer on top of the conference. The conference gave us this, but the article gave us even more on top of it. And it gave us a chance for me to sit with the presenters and interview them and ask them their thoughts and their feelings. And I guess because we have gone already through this process, even though there's different tiers of an organization coming together around a round table to share their thoughts and ideas, it was a 2-hour flow-freeing discussion. And we even layered it with a pedagogical paper for the educators to sit with and reflect with. So it was another layer to say, we can think deeply. We can think beyond, old MacDonald had a farm. And this gave us that opportunity to do that. And I was all scared, but again, with Safra and Amber's assistance and help and reassurance, I'm very proud of the paper. And I actually walk with the paper, even though I sometimes forget to read it myself. I give it to the educators to read. And when I'm in a program all the time, trying to raise those ECEs up, going, documentation goes beyond just the children. It's your thinking, just like Safra said. I bring this document to them and go, as an organization, we are supporting you on a different level. Read this and see how educators can think differently. So yeah, it was just another layer to the whole experience of the conference.
That's amazing. Another beautiful legacy of being involved. And so we've heard really powerful testimony to why this was transformative and why it was so important. Claudia, I wonder if somebody were to be in the audience today or to be watching this recording later and still kind of wavering, wondering if this is for them, what advice would you give to another participant at this time?
Do it. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just like, just do it. I would 1,000% recommend it and encourage you to try it. Like, everyone is here to support you and your growth, and everyone wants to watch you succeed. So especially if it's like an AECEO thing, it's a safe place to take that leap and to try something new and discover what you can do. Like, just as like Tracy was saying, like, discovering that you are a leader, that you are a presenter, that you are a singer, like you're not just, an ECE or, a parent, like you're all these things. And so this gives you that opportunity to bring all those different pieces of who you are and share that with everyone. And everyone has something to share. So like, even if you're nervous or don't want to, like, just do it. Don't just sign up and it will be amazing. Please do it.
And I wanted to ask Meike as well, because one of the things that you intentionally brought to the conference was an acknowledgement that some folks might need support and an attempt to mitigate that. What advice do you have for someone who needs something specifically, but is kind of worried about asking for it?
I think,
So as I'm listening to everybody, I'm realizing how much everything connects to how does learning happen, but for educators, not for the children. But so I think sometimes you just have to shift your perspective a little bit, in that yes, you might feel scared or nervous, as both Danielle and Tracy sort of mentioned that some of their presenters did, and even Claudia admitted to that. That's fine. Like, be scared, be nervous, but do it in spite of that. Don't not do it because of that, right? And so in the feedback on our survey, yeah, like a majority of people did say that they weren't comfortable with public speaking. And I'll be honest with you, neither am I. I hate it. You can see my cheeks are turning red. But the thing is that the best advice I ever got from someone, and I think the early years sector really supports lifelong learning, is to never be afraid to be a beginner. And so I think that as educators, as adults, like, yes, in our classroom, like, we do have an expertise on certain things, but when you're looking outside of your classroom to be like, okay, like, here I am, I'm a novice speaker. Where do I start, right? So when you're looking for help, to not be afraid to just ask somebody, you know, this is what I don't know how to do. Where can I get support, and not be afraid to ask it for it the same way we encourage young children to become advocates for what they need. And then if you can't do it by yourself, ask for help from a friend.
Absolutely. So many things we can learn from in the ways in which we treat children and support children is the same way that we need to start treating ourselves, right? Absolutely. Tracy, you mentioned this a little bit about how you're sort of encouraging your fellow colleagues to do this. Many of you were the spark that lit a fire for your colleagues to participate alongside you. I wonder, Danielle, how did it feel to have supported your peers to flourish in such a meaningful way?
Oh, like I said, I think it was one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had in my career as a leader, as a mentor. And as I've been listening to everyone talk, I'm just reminded of the educator that stepped down at the beginning of this process came to me the other day, and because I had asked her if we're doing another information, and I went to her and I said, you know, I swear, I promise, I will not bring you to a conference. I will not do that. And she actually came to me and said, no, I want you to push me this time. If I say no, I want you to push me that next level, because I saw what happened to my room partner when you stood beside her and held her hand and helped her through this process. So like, it's just contagious. And I couldn't ask for anything more than our educators to see how fabulous and strong and powerful and capable and so much more than, you know, than what they might see themselves as.
Absolutely. And Tracy, you did mention about how your colleagues said that they saw themselves as a leader at that point. And I think we can all imagine what that feels like as that educator to mature and reach another plateau or level in their career. But how did that make you feel as the person who helped them reach that level?
I guess it truly helped me to feel like the leader of the group that I've always wanted to be, right? Like, I've always done that mentoring and always trying to take their skills to the next level, but I really feel like I helped them personally get to another level with themselves and the growth that happened. And after we had done this speaking, one of our group was actually recovering from sickle cell and was asked to speak on behalf of the Sickle Cell Association about her experience. And she came back to me and she said, I know you're going to tell me to say yes, so I already did. And so just to see that growth, that it even goes beyond just this, it goes beyond ECE, it impacted their lives. And for that, again, I'm truly grateful, because we're always looking for ways to lift each other up.
Amazing. So that is a gift. And as we reflect on the gift that this conference was to the sector, I want to ask Safra, what do you see in your future as a leader and as a person who has left a legacy of this type of change across the sector?
a big reflection. I think I'd like to frame my response through the lens of transformative learning again, Jess. Just looking at the impact here, I want to say I am convinced that this conference has profoundly impacted everyone involved, and not just the presenters, even the conference committee. And we also heard from participants as well, like individuals who have like never been part of the AECEO community come in, and they had shared like during those lounges and the networking night, like what a big impact this was for them, just being in that space and being able to socialize with ECEs, because as you mentioned, we were very intentional with those topics in the lounges too. Nothing was practice focused. Well, everything is practice focused in a way, but also like nothing specifically focused on children and families. And I think this conference has like not only redefined our understanding of what it means to have like meaningful professional learning for ECEs, but also it has shaped our collective perspective on the image of the ECE, right? We came out as presenters, leaders, artists, and we were able to nurture our curiosities, our joys and hopes, and not just our practice. I think this is huge. We showed each other and our community that we are more, right? Like that we are more, the ECE, the image of the ECE has more than the impact that we have on children and families. And a big piece that I hear echoing here is trust. We built relationships and we trusted each other. Meike learned to trust the conference committee, that we would not put her in an uncomfortable position. Claudia too. Claudia trusted Emma, saying, if Emma knows that I can do this, I'm not going to be sitting here singing alone. I'm going to be singing with Emma. And it's the same thing with like Tracy's team trusted Tracy. Danielle's team trusted Danielle. And the biggest piece for me is all these presenters trusted me, or like not specifically me, but trusted the AECEO. They knew the AECEO would not intentionally put them in an unsafe space, that we would create brave spaces for you. And we would not put you in front of 900 participants if your presentation did not necessarily align with the conference, and we were not confident that you could go out there and show your magic, right? Like there was so much trust there and relationship building. And I think this is a big piece that gets missed out in conference planning and even professional learning in general, is we forget that piece, how important relationships are. I know all of the presenters who came into the conference, like very closely, multiple chains of emails, because you're working very closely, you're collaborating with them. And so I think that's a big piece, the fact that we were able to like redefine what does meaningful professional learning mean for ECEs.
Thank you, Safra. And I'm so looking forward to everybody on this panel, looking forward to what you do next. The AECEO will always be there for you to support you in any which way we can. But there is a trajectory here that I feel like you have touched on, that the AECEO can provide for folks in order for you to reach your self-determined potential, right? So I would like us to close this discussion with one more question. I'm going to ask you for one word from each of you to describe, this is difficult, I know, your experience with this conference. If you can pick one word to describe your experience. So I'm going to start with Safra this time.
I'm gonna use the same word that I called multiple times today: transformative.
Claudia.
Belonging.
Meike.
Joyful.
Pardon?
Joyful.
Joyful. Danielle.
Trusting.
And then finally, Tracy.
I'm going to say empowered.
Oof, good one. That is an amazing one to end on. So again, I thank all of the panelists today for sharing their experiences with us and to taking the time to revisit your accomplishments 1 year later. I would hope that this is not the last time that you pat yourselves on the back, but please take a huge hug from all of us at the AECEO for what you've done. It has been truly amazing as an organization to use this as our touchstone for future activities, future planning in the way that we think when we're trying to support ECEs. I'm going to now pass it to Rachel Neville, who will talk to us about how the conference lives on in our hub on our site.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks so much to all the panelists. Beyond just being transformative and joyful and leaving that impact, we also are going to be hosting the conference on our website. I'm just going to share screen here. So AECEO members can sign into their account. When that works for you, you can go to the Professional Learning tab and check out the AECEO Provincial Conference Hub. So the hub has all of the video recordings of the different sessions, and below each session, if there was a resource provided, we've also linked that here as well. So these sessions are not gone. You can come back and watch them. If there was one perhaps you couldn't make it to, you can check it out or watch your favorite ones over and over again. And we really hope that you love it, and we can't wait to hear how you're using it in your professional learning moving forward and other creative ways that you're using it. Thank you so much, Rachel, for giving us a sneak peek into the hub. It looks very cool. And then just before we say goodbye, I'm going to turn it over to Safra for a few final words.
Many of you might know I am no longer with the association, so I'm not with the AECEO. I have a different position with another organization as a professional learning specialist. And I wanted to share a goodbye. I think goodbye with the AECEO is never actually a goodbye. And that's just the general rule that we have at the association. You say goodbye, but you're always still connected. And I think that's true to me too. So even though I have started my other position, I'm still very much part of the association, and I'll always be part of the AECEO community. For the past 3 years, I have had the honor of being the Professional Learning Coordinator for Ontario's Professional Association for ECEs. This is not a responsibility I took lightly, as I collaborated closely with early years professionals to plan and deliver meaningful professional learning opportunities for our community. The goal was, and still is, to create transformative learning opportunities for ECEs to critically reflect on new and existing knowledge so that they can shift their understandings and perspectives. With my commitment to decolonization and the association's commitment to decolonization, each step of the professional learning model was taken with keeping this in the forefront. I don't have the words to say how much it means to me knowing that just within 3 years, the association's professional learning sessions reached over 6,000 individuals in and out of Ontario and Canada. That's huge if you think about the numbers. Through our ongoing professional learning feedback process, I've heard from many of you about the lasting impact AECEO professional learning has had on you. I never get sick of hearing this. So when our paths do cross, do share your AECEO professional learning experiences with me. Credit to the success of this professional learning model first goes to you for your interest in learning with us and for taking the brave step to share your time and knowledge with our community. It has been an amazing journey doing this work alongside each and every one of you. Please know that you have my heartfelt gratitude. My biggest thank you goes to my work bestie, Amber Straker, for always being by my side during every single session, and the rest of the AECEO team for trusting, there we go, that word trust, and supporting me with this huge responsibility. I would like to wrap up my goodbye note by expressing my deepest gratitude for the opportunity to participate in AECO professional learning alongside all of you. This experience has allowed me to redefine my understanding and broaden my image of the ECE. Your unwavering commitment to the growth and change of our community is truly inspiring. That's another word for the conference. It was inspiring. Working with each of you has been an immense honor, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been part of such an incredible community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Safra. You have no idea how many people you've touched with your role at the AECEO as a professional learning coordinator. And we're all different now from having met you and worked with you. I'm going to leave it at that and look forward to seeing much more transformative learning from everyone in this session, as well as anyone that comes across Safra, because she has a magic that you can't avoid. And we are very sad that she's left us, but again, never really does leave us. We will continue to work together for our sector. Have a great night, folks.